Is it true you have full custody, Mr. Johnson?
How is the boy handling this?
I didn't think I did anything wrong, just protected what was mine. That's what I kept telling myself when the officer handed me the court envelope at our door. It said, "Custody petition, Marlowe versus Marlowe." The world didn't explode or anything. The clock kept ticking, the baby monitor still hissed. But in that quiet kitchen, I realized my husband wasn't bluffing this time. He wanted our son, and he wanted me erased. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. My name is Evadne Marlowe, though everyone calls me Evie. I'm 34, a freelance editor who works mostly from home. My husband Graham is 36, a civil engineer. For 6 years I told people we were solid, one of those calm, balanced couples you envy because they never fight loudly. We didn't need to. I was good with words. He was good with silence. I always won in both languages. We met at a friend's barbecue when I was 27. He was different from the usual men who flirted just to hear themselves talk. Graham listened. He'd ask about the books I edited, what kind of childhood I had, even what my favorite smell was. I told him, fresh paint. He said it made sense, because I seemed like someone who was always remaking her world. I liked that. I liked how safe he looked in a crowd. Broad shoulders, quiet confidence, steady eyes. When we married 2 years later, I thought stability was love. We bought a house on a cul-de-sac lined with trimmed hedges and polite neighbors. My mother, Marjorie, said I finally did something right. My younger brother, Julian, helped Graham build the nursery years later before everything cracked. The first big crack came in the shape of Silas Reed, a man I met through a publishing project for a charity magazine. He was kind in that soft, careful way that feels like understanding. He made me laugh at my own complaints about Graham, how predictable he was, how he never surprised me. Silas said routine kills art. I said maybe it kills marriages too. I told myself Silas was just someone who saw me. That was all. But when you start keeping secrets, you've already chosen a side. When I got pregnant, I calculated dates, counted days backward, and convinced myself it was possible, maybe even likely, that the baby was Graham's. I told Silas not to ask again. He nodded, eyes full of something like pity. When I told Graham, he cried, actual tears. He kissed my stomach and said we'd make a great team. I smiled and promised myself I'd never let the truth hurt him. I thought lies could protect people if told with love, but lies grow claws when they get bored. Rowan was 18 months old when the first rumor found us. That night, the dining table looked like a magazine spread. Roast chicken, red wine, perfect lighting. My mother was chatting too loudly, as usual. Julian pushed peas around his plate. Graham's sister Diana sat across from me, watching every move I made like she was collecting evidence. Their father, Arthur, quiet but judging, kept refilling his glass. Graham looked tired but handsome. He'd been promoted at work, yet I'd barely congratulated him. I said I was exhausted, which was true. Lies are exhausting. Halfway through dinner, my phone buzzed. A message flashed on the screen before I could stop it. Hope Rowan liked the toy. He looks just like you. Silas. I turned the screen face down, laughed, and said it was a client checking a deadline. Graham's eyes flickered for a second, but he smiled that calm smile he used when he didn't want to start a scene. After dessert, he helped clear dishes, while everyone else moved to the living room. He asked quietly if I was still working with that writer friend. I said, "You mean the project manager?" "Yes. Why?" He said he was just curious. I said, "You sound suspicious." He said he wasn't. I said, "Then drop it." He dropped it, but not the thought. Later, Diana cornered me near the sink. She said she hoped the charity project was worth all the late nights. I asked what she meant. She said, "You tell me." I smiled and told her, Maybe she should worry about her own love life. She smiled back, like someone who'd already filed my answer away for future use. That night, when I climbed into bed, Graham was reading. He didn't look up. I said he was being distant. He said maybe I'd been distant first. I laughed and told him not to make drama out of nothing. He said, "Okay," the way people do when they've stopped trying. I fell asleep thinking how easy it was to win an argument with someone who refuses to play. Silas wanted to meet. He said there were things we needed to discuss, things he couldn't text. I told him I was busy, but he insisted, so I met him at a small cafe near the park. He looked nervous, thinner, older somehow. He said he couldn't keep pretending Rowan wasn't his. He said he saw photos online, Rowan's eyes, his nose. I told him to stop. He said I was cruel to everyone involved. I said he was the one who should have stayed quiet. He asked if Graham knew. I told him Graham didn't need to know, because I'd chosen my family. When I left the cafe, I saw Graham's car parked 2 spaces down. He was inside, engine off. He looked at me once in the rearview mirror before pulling away. I told myself it was coincidence. But coincidence rarely waits with headlights off. That night, I made Graham's favorite dinner, salmon, garlic mashed potatoes. He thanked me. Then he said he'd passed by downtown that afternoon. He asked if I'd been there. I said yes, meeting a client. He nodded, said he thought he'd seen me with someone. I said he must be mistaken. He said, "Maybe." I said, "You sound disappointed." He said, "Should I be?" I said, "Of course not." He said nothing more. Days later, Diana called, pretending to check on Rowan. She said she'd heard something from someone about me being seen at a cafe with another man. I said small towns invent gossip when they're bored. She said, "Just making sure." That weekend, during a barbecue, our neighbor Tessa leaned close and whispered, "People are saying your husband isn't Rowan's real father." I laughed loudly, loud enough for everyone to look. I said people needed hobbies. Graham stood across the lawn holding a drink, his face unreadable. That night, he didn't sleep in our bed. I told my mother he was sulking over work stress. She said men like Graham needed strong wives to guide them. I said I agreed, even though I wasn't sure I could guide anything anymore. A few weeks later, we hosted a neighborhood dinner. I thought maybe a show of unity would silence rumors. I wore a red dress, poured wine, laughed too much. Graham sat beside me, polite but detached. People asked about Rowan, his curly hair, his blue eyes. Diana said he looked different from the Marlowe side. Arthur coughed, uncomfortable. I said babies change every month. Halfway through, my phone rang. It was Silas again. I silenced it fast. Too late. Graham saw the name flash. He said quietly, "Still working late?" I said, "Yes, someone has to keep this family running." He said, "Someone has to tell the truth too." I said, "Don't start." He said, "You already did." The table went quiet. My mother jumped in, praising the food. Julian looked down. I smiled and changed the subject like a magician redirecting attention, but the trick was old. Later, after everyone left, Graham came into the kitchen while I was stacking plates. He said, "How long are you going to keep lying?" I said, "About what?" He said, "You know what?" I said, "No, I don't." He said he'd seen my messages, my payments to Silas. I said, "You went through my phone?" He said, "Yes." I said, "So I'm the one breaking trust now?" He said, "You broke it first." I told him he was being paranoid, that he needed help. He said he'd get help, a lawyer's help. I laughed. I told him no one would believe him. He said, "DNA will." Then he walked out. When my mother heard, she said, "Men always threaten, but never follow through." I told her she was right. She wasn't. Within a week, Graham moved into a rental near his office. He texted only about Rowan. "I'll pick him up Saturday at 10. No greeting, no sign-off, just schedules, like I was a stranger handling a delivery. Neighbors started whispering. Diana posted a vague quote online about truth being louder than lies. People connected dots faster than I could erase them. I tried to keep control. Told friends Graham was having a breakdown, told my mother not to answer questions. But every story needs a villain, and by then, everyone had decided who I was. The letter came 2 months later. Petition for custody, citing fraudulent misrepresentation of parentage and emotional distress, words colder than winter. I went to my own lawyer, a man named Pearson who smelled like burnt coffee. He said my chances were slim if the paternity test confirmed it. I said maybe it wouldn't. He said maybe it already had. He explained Graham had done a private test months earlier using a hair sample from Rowan's brush. The result was 0% probability. Hearing it out loud felt like being peeled open. I said it didn't matter. Graham had raised Rowan from birth. That should count for something. Pearson said judges care about facts, not feelings. I called Graham that night, first time in weeks. He answered on the second ring. I said we could fix this quietly. He said, "There's nothing left to fix." I said he was being cruel. He said I'd been cruel for years, only now he had proof. I said he was doing this out of revenge. He said he was doing it to protect Rowan from growing up inside a lie. I told him he was ruining our son's life. He said, "You already did." Then he hung up. My mother refused to believe it. She said Graham was bluffing. Julian avoided my calls. Even Silas stopped replying. I went through our old texts, his early messages full of warmth, then guilt, then distance. The last one simply said, "Please don't drag me into this." Too late. He was already listed as a witness. I told myself I'd walk into court calm and collected. I'd charm the judge the way I'd charmed everyone else. But confidence is just fear with lipstick. The courthouse smelled like paper and disinfectant. I wore a grey blazer, hoping to look responsible. My mother sat beside me, whispering prayers between breaths. Across the aisle, Graham looked like marble, expressionless, unbreakable. His lawyer arranged neat stacks of documents like weapons. The judge, an older woman with silver hair, started with introductions. When she said, "Evadna Marlowe, respondent," I almost didn't stand. The word respondent sounded like something you scrape off shoes. Graham's lawyer presented evidence, message threads, bank transfers, photos. A cafe camera still of me and Silas leaning close. My stomach twisted. He read a text aloud. "He's yours in every way that matters." I'd written that months before. Hearing it spoken in that room felt obscene. My lawyer objected. The judge overruled. Then came the paternity test report, official letterhead, DNA graphs, the phrase excluded as biological father. My mother gasped. I stared at the table and tried not to blink. The judge asked if I wished to respond. My throat worked, but no sound came. My lawyer nudged me. I finally said, "It was one mistake. I was scared. I didn't want to hurt anyone." The judge asked if I intentionally misled my husband. I said, I believed it could be his. Graham's lawyer asked, "Did you tell the biological father about the pregnancy?" I said, "Yes." He asked, "Did you tell your husband?" I said, "No." He said, "Thank you. No further questions." Silas was called next. He looked pale, shaking. He admitted the affair, said he'd begged me to tell Graham, said I'd refused. He looked at me once and I saw pity, not love. That hurt more than anything. The judge asked Graham if he sought punishment. He said, "No, only peace." He asked for full custody, citing my instability and the need for a consistent environment. My lawyer whispered that we could argue shared custody, but I knew it was hopeless. I said nothing. When the judge finally read the decision, her voice was steady. Primary custody granted to petitioner Graham Marlowe. Visitation for respondent to be reviewed pending counselling and home assessment. My mother made a small sound, half cry, half disbelief. Julian stared at the floor. Diana exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for a year. Graham thanked the court, shook his lawyer's hand, and walked out without looking at me. I sat there, frozen. The clerk began clearing papers, people stood, chairs scraped. It was over. No explosion, no screaming. Just order, as quiet and final as stone. Outside, cameras clicked, their flashes bursting like tiny explosions against the grey afternoon. Reporters called my name, eager for a statement, for tears, for a quote that could turn heartbreak into headlines. I kept walking. The courthouse steps felt steeper than they had that morning, as if the world itself had tilted against me. Across the street, Graham emerged from the crowd, his coat buttoned neatly, his face unreadable. He carried Rowan in his arms, the boy's small hands clutching at his father's collar for warmth. For a moment our eyes met, and the noise around us faded to nothing. Rowan reached one hand toward me, hesitant, uncertain, but then turned his face into Graham's shoulder, hiding from the wind, from the cameras, maybe even from me. That single gesture hurt more than the verdict, more than the words primary custody that had echoed through the courtroom like a sentence. I wanted to call out, to say something clever or composed, something that would make me seem in control again. But all I could manage was silence. The wind picked up, tugging at the hem of my coat, carrying my hair across my face. My mother's voice came from somewhere behind me, strained and uncertain. She asked what we should do next, file an appeal, talk to the lawyer, make a statement. I didn't turn around. I said only one word. Nothing. Because there was nothing left to do, nothing to win. The battle had ended not with shouting, but with quiet acceptance, with signatures on paper that turned love into visitation schedules and memories into evidence. I kept walking, the sound of my heels dull against the pavement, fading behind the man who had once believed every word I said. And that, I suppose, was the real custody he took, not just of our son, but of the story itself, the version of events people would believe, the narrative that once belonged to me. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next story. Write in the comments from which city you are watching.